As a child, my family cherished dogs. When I was born, Cherry, our beautiful and gentle boxer, already occupied the place of my parents' first child, and although she was bigger than me, I grew up unafraid of her size and presence. Sadly, she died just a few years later, not much older than my 6 or 7 years. A few years elapsed before Timmy came into our lives, a Yorkshire Terrier who had been the runt of the litter and who grew bigger than most other dogs of his breed. We went for long walks together, and every now and then he would escape from the garden, and I would go in search for him, calling out his name in vain. He invariably returned, his very short tail between his legs, looking thoroughly ashamed of himself and like a drowned rat. My mother would plunge him into the bath, which I don't think he liked very much. Although my own children urged us to get a dog, I didn't think it would be fair to leave it on its own with no one to keep it company. And over the last few years, it has never occurred to me to acquire a pet of any kind. So it was with some trepidation that I welcomed my son back home, not as a pet, you understand, for 2 weeks while he waited to move into his new rental property with 2 cats that he had acquired from a previous house. That story is too long to go into now. Elvis and Zorro, although initially wary of their new environment, settled in remarkably quickly and found their favorite places in the house. Elvis the tabby, a shy and rather nervous character, in a very small cupboard in the spare room, and Zorro, jet black, and with the most beautiful, translucent green eyes that looked like precious stones, would curl up on a chair covered in one of my grandmother's tapestries. On my own with them when Ben was at work, I couldn't resist watching them, talking to them, and stroking their molting fur. And when 2 weeks later, he moved into his new room, it was just a little devastating to come home and find the house empty and no one to talk to. It is, I admit, a little indulgent to talk about my 2-week-long house guests, but I've been reading a book by 2 of the most significant feminine theologians of the late 20th and 21st century, Carol Christ and Judith Plasko, a wide-ranging book on the nature of God, the world, and human relationships. What they both have to say about the natural world has made more sense to me in these last weeks since the up-close and personal relationship formed with Elvis and Zorro. It is quite an extraordinary book, 2 autobiographies that are woven into theological reflections. Christ, born into a Catholic family, moved away from her Christian origins before she discovered goddess theology, while Plasko's Jewish upbringing and practice informs her own faith in God. Both women struggled in bastions of male academia at Yale University and elsewhere before breaking free to find their own voices. The book is called Goddess and God in the World, Conversations in Embodied Theology. The authors contribute their individual chapters describing their own journeys from childhood to becoming university professors and the trajectory of their own scholarship, as well as the influence of feminist and other theologians on their work. In other chapters, They share their conversations about God in the history of theology, feminist theology, or respond to each other's words on subjects such as divine power, love, and the problem of evil. In reading this morning's parashah, I was struck by the verse in which the author of Deuteronomy proclaims, Hein l'Adonai Elohecha hashamayim, u'shemei hashamayim, ha'aretz v'chol asher ba. Behold, to the Eternal One, your God, are the heavens to their uttermost reaches, the earth and all that is on it. In one half of the verse, we appear to have a statement about God's transcendence I mentioned earlier. The heavens and the heaven of heavens are God's. This is the God who transcends the world, who resides above, beyond, or outside of nature and finite embodied life, write Christ and Plasko in their introduction to the book. But this is the God they both dismiss, a patriarchal, powerful, and omnipotent God, who they declare has justified not only domination of women, but other forms of domination as well, including slavery, colonialism, war, and environmental degradation. We have both rejected, they write, traditional views of divine transcendence and omnipotence. We find divinity in the world, in finite, embodied life. But there is disagreement between them in how they express their faith in this embodied life. Judith sees God as an impersonal power of creativity, the ground of all being and becoming, including all good and evil. While Carol Christ understands goddess, her name for God, as the intelligent, embodied love that is in all being, a personal presence who cares about the world. In many ways, these densely compressed sentences are their answers to the questions they pose in their introduction. Is God or goddess to be found outside the world or within it? Are we called to a life beyond the body and nature, or is this world our home and bodily life the only life we have? As Christ moves away from the Christianity of her youth, disillusioned with the church's lack of engagement in civil rights, she is drawn to the writings of Martin Buber and the lectures of Abraham Joshua Heschel, and acknowledges a deep sense of spiritual communion in nature. Both scholars struggled with classical Greek thought that became the foundation stone for traditional Western theologies, separating mind from body, and creating a set of oppositions that included rational versus irrational, soul and body, spirit and nature, male and female. They write, in each case, women were identified with the despised and subordinated side of polarization. Man was rational, spiritual, and able to transcend the body and nature, while woman was defined by her connections to the body and nature and had a less rational capacity than man. Both were on a journey to dissipate this duality and connect spirit and nature. Carol Christ immersing herself in the goddess movement, drawing on the symbol of goddess, who legitimates and celebrates women's power, bodies, wills, and bonds with each other, as she writes. Through rituals and nature mysticism, Christ found her own expression of sacredness, uniting the spiritual and social quests of women and affirming the body and nature and women's relationships with each other. For Judith Plasko, while attracted to the idea of God's immanence in the world, natural imagery was secondary in her attempts to evoke the presence of God in, as she put it, a diverse, egalitarian, and empowered community of Israel. Community, she has written, allows the articulation and development of a nature spirituality, and she describes herself as a panentheist, that is, someone who believes in a God who is present in everything, and yet at the same time is not identical with all that is. Just as a community may be more than the sum of its parts, so God is more than the totality of creation and includes and unifies creation. I am much more comfortable with Judith Plaskow's affirmation of the centrality of God's unity or oneness than with Christ's goddess theology, although I have to say I'm not quite ready to let go of God as a transcendent being as well. Plasko writes, despite the fractured, scattered and conflicted nature of our experience of both the world and ourselves, there is a unity that embraces and contains our diversity and connects all things to each other. The natural world can be full of stunning beauty, she says, but also has the capacity to annihilate. We can be astounded by the care, altruism, and intricate interdependence found everywhere in nature, but also by its predation and violence. So too in ourselves, we are a mixture of great kindness and cruelty. Plasko does not deny God's presence in the ambiguity that exists in nature and human life. How can we not see that the same amazing inventiveness that allows us to establish systems of justice, feed the hungry, and find cures for many diseases is present when we develop new weapons and build crematoria? Behold, to the Eternal One your God are the heavens to their uttermost reaches, the earth and all that is on it. To return to the verse in our parashah, even if we dismiss, along with Kristen Plaskow, the idea of a transcendent God in the uttermost reaches of heaven, there is still the second half of the verse, the earth and all that is on it. What follows is an expression of God's profound attachment and love for Israel, which is communicated through divine justice, upholding the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and befriending the stranger, providing food and clothing. It is this verse and the verse that follows, requiring us too to befriend the stranger, for we were strangers in the land of Egypt, that seemed to me to be an expression of God's presence in the world. God's unity and oneness bind us together in our human endeavor to support life, to acknowledge that there is something greater than ourselves in the world, and that there is an ethical imperative that is part of that oneness and our connections with each other to bring justice and kindness to the world. On Thursday, as I was returning home from a cycle ride in the late afternoon, a small black cat with green eyes was crouched in the front garden. Zorro, I called out in surprise, imagining that she had somehow found her way 10 miles from Hackney to Golders Green. She stared at me for a brief second and then turned away and disappeared. I searched everywhere for her, opening the back door to see if she would return, and I would find her sitting in the sunshine on the step, staring intently at the birds. How could she have found her way back, I wondered. But she was gone, and for a brief moment, I wondered if what I had seen was an illusion, or maybe it was simply an expression of longing for a connection with something unseen, disclosed only in moments of heightened perception and awareness.